Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Fire Emblem Talkthrough podcast thing with me, the Jelly Monkey.
And me, Sven the Crusader.
Last time we finished off the Dread Isle arc and then transitioned into this current arc by meeting a living legend, aka Athos.
Or in some cases, aka Asshole.
And now he's given us a new mission. We must now head to the Shrine of Seals in order to unlock the ancient weapons. Unfortunately, it's located in Bern, or Bern, depending on which region. Yeah, I should probably explain. In Europe, it was changed to Bern because Bern is actually the capital of Switzerland. So, yeah, there might have been some European players who were a bit offended that we were launching an attack on Switzerland.
Okay, that is a parallel that I never thought I'd hear. Militaristic Bern compared to Switzerland, which hasn't been involved in a conflict for 60 years.
Yeah, it is a bit odd now that I think about it.
In fact, not 60 years, 70 years, because World War II ended 70 years ago. So, yeah, that's kind of an odd parallel, and now I can't unthink it.
Oh, dear. So, yeah, the unfortunate thing is, right now in Switzerland, Bern. Right now, Bern is basically a hotpot for political tension, and at the moment, they're basically looking for any chance to invade another country. So, free lords entering a country uninvited, that is basically an open letter saying, "Dear Bern, please invade our countries, we give you permission to do so."
Yeah, but we'll be damned if we're gonna let political tension stop our quest to find the ultimate weapons. The Gigas, what?
So, let's waste no time and get started on our first chapter. Chapter 24. Four Fangs Offensive. And oh boy, there's a lot of story to cover first. Okay, the group is going undercover in Bern. By undercover, I mean wearing cloaks, which actually looks kind of cool on the sprite, not gonna lie.
But we do marvel at the fact that actually worked.
Yeah, pretty much. Although, they mention how it's gonna be kind of difficult to get to the Shrine of Seals since it's more than likely under heavy guards, but then Penta Louise come up with an idea which I'm actually surprised they didn't try first. Well, Louise has a distant relation to the Queen and Penta's royal connection, so maybe we could just, ask the royal family. Yeah, it's kind of a shame they didn't think of this first, but what the hey. We're also introduced to a new character in this chapter, Nino, who is the daughter of Sonia. However, by a strange quirk of fate, she's absolutely nothing like her.
Yeah, funny how that works. Not that I'm foreshadowing anything.
No. But yeah, she's happy and cheerful, and she only gets the minor jobs, mainly being messenger. And we're kind of skipping ahead, but one curious thing that happens in this chapter is that halfway through, Nino's waiting to deliver a message, and Jafar shows up in order to find out what the next target is. But he's essentially bleeding to death.
It was at this point that 12-year-old me cheered. But moving swiftly on from that.
Yeah, but actually, Nino has a slightly different mentality from 12-year-old Sven, because instead of killing Jafar on the spot, which is what the Black Fang's supposed to do in this situation, Nino decides to bandage up Jafar and heal his wounds, which he's confused by, since in his mind it's the least logical thing to do, but she's insistent on protecting him. We never find out exactly what caused all the injuries, although my money is that he was taking part in... There is a certain theft that the Black Fang were involved in, and I'm going to guess that is how he got beaten up quite so badly.
Yeah, either that or 12-year-old me traveled time and hired mercenaries to pound the crap out of him.
Time and dimensions, apparently.
I did not know 12-year-old me had access to a TARDIS, but maybe that's just a big blank spot in my memory.
Oh, jeez. But yeah, that's an interesting side plot of the chapter. The main plot is that we joked about how their disguise somehow managed to get them into Bern. Unfortunately, it did not confuse the Black Fang, who admittedly have a brief moment of confusion where they go, wait, what? I thought they said they were in the desert. How did they suddenly end up here?
The wonders of having an asshole sage on our side.
Indeed. But In this mode of confusion, they decide to split up. One person goes on ahead to kill the group, the other goes back to get reinforcements. Now, this is where summarizing this chapter is going to get complicated. You can get one of two different chapters, and this is entirely based on what the maximum level of your lord is by the time you reach them. If the level of your lords combined are over 50, so let's just say if Hector is 20, Lyn is 20, and Eddiewood's 10, then you will unlock the chapter where Linus stays behind to be the boss. If your combined level total is under 50, Lloyd stays behind to take care of you, whilst Linus goes off to get help.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting mechanic there. And as a result of this, the unit that you recruit in this chapter also changes completely. For better or for worse.
Yeah, so basically this is an interesting way of scaling the difficulty, because it might seem a bit mad that the easier map has you facing off against the Swordmaster first, but what you've got to keep in mind is that the other brother will come back and face you later in the game, and if you're as bad as, say, I was when you were playing this game for the first time and your lords weren't the combined level, fun fact, the reason why that happened was because I had gotten into my head that lords were weak and thus kept them out of all fighting possible.
Unlike me, who spammed them everywhere and broke all their weapons.
Yeah, I don't know what past me was thinking there, but yeah, if you have that condition, or in the second time I played this, you're on hard mode, where it's incredibly hard to get the experience, then you get to face the Swordmaster at a lower level, which means he's less likely to perform a critical hit and slaughter your entire party.
Yeah. Or to put that in the words of Kikoskia, less likely to eat your entire face. Literally, your entire face.
Yeah, the Swordmasters are I don't know if we've talked about them, but they're an interesting class that is based on around high speed and high skill, meaning that they don't have much attack power, but they can very easily dodge all attacks and tear you apart with criticals. And I've also got to say, just on a side note, I freaking love the Swordmaster critical animations. I know it's cheesy and over the top, but I just love the way after images are used.
It's true. I mean, it's the most shonen thing on the planet, but sometimes rule of cool.
Yeah. But anyway, we're getting off topic. Point is, there are two chapters. Okay, so quickly covering the easier version first with Lloyd. It's basically a fog of war chapter. You can't see what's in front of you, and you're kind of choked down two paths because of the way it's set up. You can send a flyer over to the right-hand side to explore the village and get Earth Seal, which is a pretty cool item. But there are snipers and archers around there, so just be careful is all I'm saying.
Yeah, pretty much.
As Sven pointed out, you also get different recruitable characters in each chapter, in each map, sorry. In this case, we get Wallace.
Yeah, that hammy general we recruited in Lyn's story. Who, if you don't recruit here, drops off the face of the planet, presumably because he got lost and fell into the ocean.
Probably. And to recruit Wallace, you basically have to have any member of the Lindus Legion talk to him, so you can have Florina, Sane, Kent, or Lyn talk to him and he'll join your side. And it's nice to have that little bit of nostalgia of the group back together again, but Wallace's stats, well, here's the thing. He's kind of buggered in terms of placement, because in terms of stat growth, if him and Oswin were put side by side and allowed to level at the exact same pace, they're pretty much interchangeable. They have very similar growth, so there's not one that's clearly better than the other. The problem is, if you play Lyn's story through the normal way, in other words, the tutorial way, he's forced to promote early, so his stat growths are going to suffer for it. And if you play Lyn's story on hard mode and don't promote him right away, then he just comes way too late, because by the time you pick him up, you've already got units who are starting to turn into promoted units, so having like a level 50 knight just wandering around isn't really that useful though.
Yeah, I mean, story-wise, this makes sense. I'll get into that whenever we cover the other recruitable unit here. story-wise, Wallace makes sense. Placement-wise, he's screwed.
Although, story-wise, I should also mention, it's kind of funny. It's played for laughs how Wallace somehow got lost and bumped into the group. If you read his support conversation between Lynn and Wallace, it turns out he was here for a much different reason. If you go back into the very early parts of our Talkthrough, you'll recall that Lynn vowed vengeance against a group of bandits known as the Talavar, who slaughtered her entire tribe, parents included. Wallace didn't like the idea of a noble lady of Kalin's having a heart filled with vengeance and hatred. So, he decided to go to Bern, find the headquarters of the Talavar bandits, and kill them all single-handedly.
Which is impressive for a pre-promoter level 15 knight. And it's certainly effective.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that this is one of the interesting things I love about Fire Emblem, and it's also why it's kind of hard to take it as face value. I mean, a lot of times with games like this and Awakening, people will often go, oh, these characters seem so tropey, or, oh, plot points are raised but they're never touched on. No, you need to look into the support conversations, because not only does it give each character more depth, but also plot points like this can come back and get more evaluation on. And I do like this idea that there's this side of Wallace we never see who just quietly, in the middle of the night, just walks off, goes up to a bandit camp, and just completely annihilates them in a single night.
Yeah, and to be completely honest, I now want to see a modded map of Fire Emblem where that happens. Wallace just taking on an entire bandit camp, Skyrim style, single-handedly.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. But yeah, the other thing you have to worry about in this chapter is Lloyd himself, who, he's not given a weapon with a high critical range, however it is still a silver sword, so he can cause some damage, and there is also one very nasty detail in that, in hard mode, he moves. So, what will most likely happen in this chapter is that most of your group's going up the left-hand side. Their movement is restricted by the mountains in front of them, so they're just kind of moving forward one at a time. And then suddenly, Lloyd will suddenly charge out of the fog and start attacking whichever unit's closest to him, which is, yeah, that's a pants-sweating moment right there, folks.
Yeah, I can imagine so. I've never had it happen to me, but I'm not keen on having it happen to me.
Yeah, so my advice would be, well, first off, be very careful of who the unit in the front is, but when you get down there, just have either someone like Oswain who's highly defended, or pelt him with magic and ranged attacks so that there's less chance of him criticaling you. But otherwise, he's not too hard of a boss, so you should be okay this time around. And with that, we move on to the second map, which, by stark contrast, is a wide open area. Your main problem here is going to be the Wyvern Riders that are flying around all over the place, and in the southeastern corner, there will be pirates swarming towards you, but I usually find if I just send Dart down there, he can take care of most of them, and the rest of the group can just happily march along the side, taking out whatever units are in their way. We should also mention that there is a second character who appears at the southeastern corner that Dart can talk to. And oh boy. This character's name is Geets. He is a warrior that is roughly, I would say, level 10. And here's the thing. We're going to meet another character later who many people like to proclaim is the most useless character in this game. I can see where those people are coming from, and I definitely put him in a close second. But for me, Geets is the most useless person in the entire game, because say what you like about that other person, he comes with a useful item. Geets just comes with standard weapons.
Yeah, not only that, for some reason people claim that Geets is the most useful pre-promoted unit in the game. Even if he is, that's not saying much. Because his stats suck, his weapons suck, and in terms of story, he has no point at all.
Yeah, basically, the reason he's here at all, Geets is the brother of a pre-promoted Fire Emblem 6 named Geese. This might have been interesting, except his brother is only mentioned in like a passing sentence in Dart's support conversations with him, and We honestly don't ever learn anything else about him. We know that his father does some shady business, and that's really about it. He's an incredibly pointless inclusion. Like, oh, he's the brother of someone in Fire Emblem 6. What does that mean to us? He's not interesting as a character, and he has nothing interesting to contribute in terms of support conversations. There's no deep backstory of why he's here. He joins us because he's bored.
Yeah, literally that's all. And not to mention, this is completely pointless considering Fire Emblem 6 was never released in the West.
Yeah, and on top of that, he is a warrior, and I know some people are going to disagree with this, but personally, I consider warrior to be one of the most useless classes in the game. Mainly because everything they can do, the berserkers can do better and then some. Generals can also do an equally good job with just an axe, and you also have Hector, who is one of the most powerful axe users in the entire Fire Emblem series.
Yeah, so there's really not much point to warriors to begin with, and you'll get more plot out of Dorcas and Bartray anyway.
Yeah, so honestly, then Geese is just not worth it. I mean, I recruit him for completionist sake, but honestly, I never use him after this initial chapter. He's just so utterly pointless.
Yeah, that's just about the same with me, because basically what you're getting in place of Lawless in this chapter is a warrior, with all the point of the nudity in Game of Thrones.
Oh dear. So, yeah, time for us to... I was about to say stop beating around the bush, but after that last sentence, that was a bit awkward.
Oh god.
Boss battle!
Yeah, let's move on to that really quickly.
Yeah, the boss battle against Linus, he is a hero class, so you don't have to worry about criticals so much with him, but he is kind of trickier to fight him because heroes tend to be all-round good units. They have a good balance of attack, defense, and speed, so he is still going to be a hard hitter. My main advice would be attack him with a projectile so that he starts to use a weaker weapon and have the sword users take advantage of that.
Yeah, pretty much. Because even though he has decent speed for a boss in this game, it's still low enough that if you can get Guy or Raven, if you're using him, in there and beating on him while he has that hand axe equipped, you'll be in a pretty good position.
No matter which map you're on, the chapter ends with the boss taking Eliwood hostage, and then Eliwood suddenly decides to have a philosophical moment when he starts asking, why must we fight? And this utterly confuses the Black Fang because they thought Eliwood was supposed to be evil, so they think, you know what, I'll come back later, but watch your backs, and then they disappear. This is a very lucky break, because it could lead to the Black Fang turning on each other and saving us the problem. Unfortunately, before that boss can report to the rest of the Black Fang, they're taken out by Limstella.
Yep, in a rather unfortunate scene, Limstella appears and uses them for quintessence.
Pretty much, yes. And unfortunately, this means the other brother, whoever it is, decides to go on a murderous rampage against our group.
So, not quite the turn of fortune we were hoping for.
After all this chapter is over, we then switch scenes to the Bern Manse, where we get our first glimpse at the kid of Queen and Bern.
Basically, this family has all the blondness and all the f***ed-up personality of House Lannister.
Yep. To give you the long and short of all the gruesome details, the King of Bern has had an affair with a completely different woman and has now basically relegated the Queen and her son Zephidel to the royal manse miles away from the actual palace. To say the Queen is not taking this well is an understatement, as one of the first things she does when the King enters is go on this insane rant about how the king had a daughter named Guinevere who is not a legitimate heir. My son is about to achieve succession, so I spit on you, etc. And then the king just suddenly goes, yeah, by the way, you know the Fire Emblem, that important tool that the king needs to succeed the throne? It's gone missing. Sorry.
Very convenient, that.
Yes, so just as an aside note, the Fire Emblem is always an important MacGuffin to the plot of the story, but what exactly it is always changing. In Marth's games and in Awakening, because it's roughly tied to the same universe, it is a shield of magical powers. In this and Fire Emblem 6, it's a succession tool, and funnily enough, in Fire Emblem 6, it's Roy's promotional item. And in other games, it's kind of funny. Both Sacred Stones and Path of Radiance, it is the seal of a demon.
Sure enough it is.
So, even if they never actually directly refer to it as a Fire Emblem, usually it's mentioned that these is a sacred power stone that is nicknamed by some scholars as Fire Emblem. So, the title name does appear in every single game, even if it is just in an offhand comment in a support conversation sometimes.
Yeah, so kind of a nice touch, even if it's roundabout.
Indeed. But, yeah, point is, the Queen's distraught that all of her plans are in ruins, and then Louise pops in to say hi and offer a shoulder to cry on. Unfortunately, the Queen also finds out that Penn's in the area, and heroes arrive, person has a problem. You can see where this is going.
Skyrim syndrome, folks.
Yeah, so basically our group is roped into the task of finding the Fire Emblem so that we can get to the Shrine of Shields as a reward.
Yeah, pretty much the group is shoestringed into the position of the guard chasing after someone's sweet roll.
And this is where a slight twist occurs. See, if you're playing Anyone's story, our characters would do the sensible thing and go straight to the Bern Palace in order to find some clues. But in Hector's mode, we get one extra chapter, which is, well, let's be blunt about this, it's filler. That chapter is,
Chapter 25, Crazed Beast.
And ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between, we present to you the most useless chapter in Fire Emblem.
Yeah, pretty much. This has no story significance. Like, here is the premise. Hector says to the others, no, I talked to this guy. He told me the Fire Emblem was over here. And lo and behold, it's an enemy trap.
Basically, Hector has all the common sense of Sam Fisher in the Splinter Cell games with none of the success.
Yeah. This leads into a trap, and okay, I'm going to launch into a random aside, but I assure you it's important. I would like to talk to all of you good folks at home about the letter H. It's a word in the alphabet that doesn't get talked about very much. It does provide a useful transition from T into other letters in a very satisfying F sound, and it also is a content mainly amongst grammar bullies who get annoyed if you say hate instead of H. I don't know why. And it is also the only thing that prevents me from sharing the name with this bland palette swap of a boss.
Yeah, basically, for the most useless map in Fire Emblem, we get the most useless boss in Fire Emblem, who I can only describe as the mountain who rides with a white horse.
Pretty much, yeah. Basically, the entire premise is that this guy is a former member of the Black Fang, but he was jailed because Brendan Reed considered him to be too violent and was attacking innocents, which, as someone has pointed out, is kind of a contradiction in itself, since the Black Fang usually just quickly murder the people who attack the innocents, so...
Yeah, I have to agree with that, because why would he be in the Black Fang in the first place? Not only does Pascal spit in the face of everything the Black Fang stands for, he's also about as subtle as someone sticking their fingers in your eyes and making your head explode.
Yeah, this... yeah. Here's how the chapter goes. It's a wide open space, and there are 3 forts you have to capture. The fort in the northwestern corner will have thousands of cavaliers swarming out of it, so send your axe units that way. There are loads of brigands and other warriors to the southeastern corner, so send your sword users and good axemen that way. And loads of magic users on the far right, so send Pegasus Knights that way, and you're pretty much done.
Yeah, basically. And aside from that, all I can advise is don't get ganked by the ballistas.
Yeah, there were some of those there, but at this stage, if you're careful, you should be perfectly fine. There was only one redeeming factor in this entire chapter, and that is a recruitable character who you can pick up here. the final Pegasus sister, Farina.
Ladies and gentlemen, and again everything in between, presenting the only decent thing about this map, my favorite character in Fire Emblem 7.
Yeah, Farina is an interesting one. The way to recruit her is, she will appear on the map after a couple of turns and will then actively fly towards Hector. She then talks up to Hector and makes a very simple and blunt point. If you want to hire me, pay 20,000 gold.
Basically, I hope you've arena spammed. Because the only way you can recruit Farina at this point is loads and loads of money.
Indeed. Thankfully, you can get plenty of gems beforehand, so you can sell this off for extra money. But yeah, if you set aside enough gold, you can buy Farina for 20,000 gold, and I would strongly recommend it. Because, okay, here's how the Pegasus trio works. Florina is the general all-round Pegasus Knight with high stat growths. Fiora is a Pegasus Knight with defense and skill growths. Farina is the attack-based one. And she comes with a Killer Lance right off the bat.
And let me follow on by saying that with that Killer Lance and her positioning on the map, you could easily get her to level 20 unpromoted by completely and utterly wrecking the bishops.
Oh,
because
yes.
she will completely and utterly wreck the bishops.
Yeah. And it also doesn't help that light magic tends to be one of the weaker sets of magic, so...
In the words of Risk Restar's reaction to the Thor Raiden death battle, he's not okay! He's not okay!
Oh dear. Yeah, and to make this even more perfect, that village over there, they give you an Elysian whip.
So you can have your third Falcon Knight right off the bat.
Yep, and yeah, this game is part of the reason why I have and always will be a Pegasus 9 fanboy, because holy crap, these units are so good!
Yeah, and it's especially true in this game, because you've got the usual jack of all stats with high growth, which is Florina. You've got the resilient one, which is Fiora, and then you've got Farina, who hits like a tank on supercharged treads.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly she has the defense of wet tissue paper, but frankly, with her speed and luck, she can pretty much dodge her way out of most of it anyway, and if you've been using the other Pegasus Knights up until this point, you're used to this by now.
Yeah, and on top of that, you also unlock the triangle attack.
Oh yes, we will talk about that later, but needless to say, it is a useful thing to have at your disposal. And I suppose we better get this out of the way. Pascal is a paladin that's level 14 with a spear. You have fought many other paladins like this. The Lord's unique weapons can completely tear them apart, and if for some reason you don't feel like using those, an axe user or a general can pretty much clean his clogs. He is just... there is absolutely no challenge in facing him.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a level 14 paladin, ex-member of the Black Fang, mind you. I'm guessing Pascal was in the Black Fang around the same era as Scotty, but you're looking at a level 14 paladin, ex-Black Fang with 10 speed.
Yeah, it's just... oh my... why him? Why did he have to have that name? Why him?
Yeah, it's basically just, why does this exist? Why is this a thing? This chapter is pointless. This boss is pointless. The only good thing about this chapter is Farina. Let's move on.
Yeah, although I will say, as well as her stats, Farina is also a fun character to be around. I mean, she has a lot of qualities similar to Nami from One Piece in that she is high energy, very confident, and really, really likes money.
Arguably a little too much, as you find out from her supports with Fiora.
Yeah. Although she is also one of the potential partners you can give to Hector at the end of the game. And honestly, I'm always in a constant debate whether I prefer Hector and Florina or Hector and Farina, because Hector and Florina's support conversation is cute, but the one between Hector and Farina, they actually interact a bit more, and you do get the kind of sense that Hector is actually saving Farina from herself in a way.
And not to mention, it's just funny. Then again, I also do have a soft spot for Farina's supports with Dart, because pirates.
Yeah, their support is basically, there's a legendary treasure of the Pirate King.
Yeah, basically, oh my god, their support is the entirety of One Piece.
Oh wow, yeah, now that you mention it. But yeah, with all of that, we can finally leave the filler behind as we move on to Chapter 26, Unfulfilled Heart. Now, we start this chapter by creeping up on the royal palace, and it's here, Edward brings up a plot point which leads into one of the biggest elements of the game that makes absolutely no sense. And it's going to require an long explanation, so bear with me. Now, in Japan, the class of Wyvern Rider is known as a Dragon Rider. The reason for this change was because in this story, despite the fact that they keep insisting rather heavily that all dragons have been banished from the continent, no one has ever seen a dragon before, that's why Nurgle bringing the fire dragon over was so terrifying, Bern apparently has dragons. Ones that they can just fly around and use in their army. I mean, it made sense in Fire Emblem 6, because the whole point of that game was that Bern had somehow teamed up with dragons and they were taking over the world. But here it's just like, oh yeah, Bern's always had them. How?
Okay, that's an interesting point. I've never actually thought of it like that. I guess it's that old lazy excuse that, oh, wyverns aren't really dragons. Just ignore it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think that's all the English dub could do, because let's face it, in the Japanese version, they're still just called Dragon Riders, and that makes even less sense, because, and so, after the Great War, the dragons were all banished from Elebe, except for the dumb ones. Bern decided to hold on to those and use them for their army.
Oh my god, poor wyverns.
Point is, to try and get some more information, they decide to go back to the scene of the crime, which is the Bern Royal Palace, so they decide to do some Metal Gear Solid action and sneak inside, hiding behind the bushes. It's then that, in true Metal Gear Solid fashion, they just happen to stumble across people talking about the plots. In this case, we learn two things. One, the Bern royal family is still completely messed up, although, ironically, both Zephyrdel and Guinevere, despite them only being half-siblings, actually really like each other.
Which, suffice it to say, the king does not approve of.
Yeah, pretty much. In fact, Zephyrdel decides to give Guinevere a baby fox, and then when Guinevere says, "Could you hold on to my fox for me, Dad?" the first thing he does is, "Hey, God, take this fox. Kill it. Don't tell anyone what you did."
Basically, King Desmond is what you would get if you crossed King Robert Baratheon with the Lannisters.
Yeah, pretty much. In fact, we've already mentioned that this could be a Game of Thrones thing, especially since Desmond does not have many redeemable qualities to him. As in, the main reason he dislikes Zephyrdel so much is because he's talented. You would think that having a son who is a child prodigy would be something any father would be proud of, but no, he's just jealous. And so, after Guinevere disappears, Sonia arrives, and they decide to talk very loudly about A, the fact that they stole the Fire Emblem, and B, that they plan to kill Zephyrdel.
Yeah, I will keep mentioning Game of Thrones in this entire arc, because it is depressingly relevant. So yeah, King Desmond's crippling inferiority issues aside.
Yeah, our heroes now have the information of A, where the Fire Emblem is, and B, that they need to hurry the hell up, otherwise Zephydel's going to get killed as well, and all of their efforts will be rendered moot anyway. Unfortunately, they can't sprint into action just yet. As it turns out, the two twigs ended up being spotted and hunted by Vida, a sort of member of the Black Fang. Basically, she's a former Bern soldier, but she's working with the Black Fang because she hopes it would be a good way of getting into the King's good graces.
It says quite a lot about King Desmond that Vida thinks she can get in his good graces by murdering someone.
That should surprise me, but it doesn't now that I think about it.
Me either. Man, that's a bad sign, Bern.
Point is, she's now attacking the group, and so this sets up this chapter. Basically, the goal of this chapter is to survive for 7 turns. And my main tactic is basically get everyone into a circle with all the long-range units at the center and all the big armored units around the outside. And, yeah, just hold that for about 7 turns and you should be okay. Send a couple of Pegasus Knights in order to pick up stuff in the villages, but otherwise, yeah, just stick to the circle plan and you should be fine.
Yeah, and for God's sake, do not try to fight Vida.
Yeah, Vida, it's it's been established in this chapter that she's been enhanced by Nurgle's magic. She's been given a magic spear, I'm dead serious here, that basically gives all of her stats major increases, meaning that any attempts to fight her will render your units being slaughtered.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at these stat boosts, and I swear, this spear gives Vida more speed than any boss in the entire game, save for the final one.
Yeah, she is definitely a force to contend with. However, many people have also managed to exploit this. There is a glitch, a rather infamous glitch in this game. There is an item called a mine, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. Place it on a square, enemy walks on that space, they blow up. However, the game has an autosave system to prevent you from cheating, so whenever your unit takes damage, well, basically if your unit does anything, it automatically saves it. But you can use this autosave system against itself by resetting the game as soon as the enemy soldier walks on the mine. Do this and go back into the save file, it will start off from the enemy getting blown up, and then give you full control of the enemy army.
Yeah, you have the complete power at that point to just gank any item you want from the enemy, as well as render them completely useless. We'll get back into talking about this because it's basically the only way to level up a certain character later on.
Yeah, it's... The reason I bring it up is that many people have used this exploit to get Vida to give the spear to Malinus, and thus you now have a weapon which gives you stat boosts.
Yep. You have a weapon that gives you stat boosts better than the final legendary weapons.
Yeah, if you can pull it off, it is an insanely broken strategy. And for those of you about to point out that the spear would only last for about 20 attacks, there's a village at the bottom left corner that gives you a hammer, a staff that resets the weapon's usage gauge.
Just FYI, Oswin plus the Uber Spear, instant win.
Oh yes. Oh dear, but yeah, assuming you played this chapter legitimately, it's not really that hard. The other thing I would say is worth doing is make sure to kill the shamans, because one of them drops Luna, which is a spellbook you can gain legitimately, but is still equally broken.
Yep. Luna is single-handedly the only reason anyone ever recommends you use Canis.
Yeah, pretty much. I believe we talked about this when facing the boss back of the pirate ship, but in case we didn't, Luna is a spell that basically ignores the enemy resistance, and it also has a ridiculously high critical rate, so yeah, basically, you've got an insanely powerful spell.
Yeah, you've got a Magi Nuke. And honestly, even though I was infinitely annoyed by the... Canis, I'll switch up how I say it, I swear. Even though I was infinitely annoyed by the Canis worshippers of the past, this is a perfectly legitimate reason to use him.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, dark spells have always been kind of broken. The problem is, the reason why it's never been an issue up until now is because, well, there's no nice way to say this. A good chunk of the shamans have been completely and utterly useless. I mean, there have been some exceptions. I heard Ray in Fire Emblem 6 was good, but otherwise, Canis has very average stats, but combined with the broken spells, that allows him to be a formidable fighting machine. Other shamans, you've got Noel from Fire Emblem 8, who I once summarized on Neo-Seeker forums as a man with the life expectancy of a hedgehog on a motorway.
Yeah, his defense is made of paper and his... I'm trying to think of a good analogy of this. His defense is made of paper and his speed is made of brigands.
And on top of that, an abysmal luck stat.
Yeah.
Meaning, even if he has high chance of defending, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and then speaking from personal experience, you also had Sophia and Nime from Fire Emblem 6. One was the worst pre-promote in the game, and the other one, yeah, life expectancy of a hedgehog on a motorway, paper-thin defense and a 10% speed growth.
Oh god. And it's actually ironic because, fun fact, Nimne, the worst pre-promote in Fire Emblem 6, that's Canis' mother.
Oh my god, I forgot.
Anyway, point is, at the end of this chapter, Vida, despite having this clear advantage, suddenly grows bored and flies off. Okay?
God, that sounds like an excuse my 14-year-old self would write to get a villain off the battlefield. I think I actually used that at one point.
Yeah, so Vida, even though this battle means an awful lot to her, decides to fly away, and ironically, because Lyn has mad tracking skills, or no mad tracking skills, I should say.
But dumb Tish.
I'm sorry. but yeah, because of that, she leads them directly to the Black Fang base, which leads to Chapter 27, Pale Flower of Darkness. Oh boy, there is a lot to talk about in this chapter.
Yeah, and let me preface our doing so by saying that this chapter is a pain in the ass.
Indeed. First, we better talk about the plot. Vida gets down on her knees and begs Sonia for another chance, and Sonia pretty much tells her to stop being pathetic and get out of her sight, which normally it would be a sign that Sonia's a cruel woman, but at the same time, Vida was winning, and she quit. She can't really say that she was in a bad situation.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, we're gonna get more into Sonia later, but with that spear, Vida could have curb-stomped the entire map.
Yeah, this is admittedly one of the weaker moments of writing in the story, and unfortunately I'm going to mention one other weak moment, because Sonia uses this to explain her commanding philosophy to... Oh, what god, no, what's her name again?
Ursula?
That's it, yes.
That tells you how important she's gonna be.
Yeah, this is the problem we're talking about. She explains to Ursula her commanding philosophy, which is, there are those born to lead, and the rest are human refuse who you can use as you see fit. She says the reason Vida lost is because she treats the refuse as equals and it drags her down, and she tells Ursula not to follow this. And she says to Ursula, you want to be like me, don't you? And Ursula instantly says, of course. Here's a fun question. Who the hell is Ursula, and why does she want to be like Sonia exactly?
Yeah, spoiler alert, we never know. Ever.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about Ursula's character, is that, well, the fact that she doesn't have any character. She just seems to be a loyal servant of Sonia, but I just don't get it exactly. I mean, she's not a morph, she doesn't have any of the telltale signs. She can't be a Black Fang member, because all the other Black Fang members, or at least Lloyd and Linus, are antagonistic towards her, so why is she here? It's just so weird to have the Four Fangs to be so well characterized, and I'm including Jafar in this. Oh, we're going to get into Jafar in just a moment, but Ursula's just like this blank slate. She's just someone there to fill out the numbers, because I guess Four Fangs sounds much cooler than Three Fangs.
Yeah, it also sounds biologically feasible, but that's beside the point. Yeah, it's just really odd that you have such a well-characterized group of villains, and then you have this massive plot hole.
Yeah, it's like everyone else is such a big personality that she doesn't get any time to shine, or at the very least, explain to us who she is. I mean, you could have made her completely delusional. You could have made her insanely cruel like Sonia. You could have had her be hypnotized or something. I don't know. But you never get anything of that. She is just a dull, stoic character who wants to follow Sonia and be like her. For reasons.
It's actually very disappointing.
Yeah. At the very end of the chapter, we get to see both Sonia and Jafar characterized, and... oh boy. Okay. Sonia decides to give both Jafar and Nino the mission of killing Prince Zephyrdel. Nino is eager to do it, but she asks Sonia if she can have like a cuddle, or just at least have her hold her hand, because, well, basically Nino's never had that throughout her entire childhood. Which is actually kind of sad.
Actually, whenever I think of it, It's just a taste of what's to come.
Oh, yes, because at that request, Sonia says, you know what, if you complete this mission, I will do everything. I will hold your hand, I will hug you, I will stroke your face, everything, just as long as you complete this mission. And Nino goes, yay, okay, I'll do my best, and runs off. And then Sonia turns straight round to Jafar and says, yeah, she's the scapegoat, kill her as soon as she's done.
You know, it's really odd. Despite Nurgle's intentions of creating completely emotionless killing machines in the morphs, so far they've been nothing but cruel monsters.
Indeed. And the funny thing is, Jafar, the man trained by Nurgle to be an emotionless killing machine, reacts in horror to this idea.
Yeah, and we're talking about the same person who earlier on completely murdered Leela. So, you know there's something wrong with your morality whenever you have the unquestioning murderer questioning.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, aside from the fact that Nino saved Jafar's life earlier, it's established in support conversations that he kind of considered Nino both a kindred spirit and a sort of, you showed me that I could be better kind of situation, but yeah, even so, it takes someone being unbelievably cruel to her to actually get him to act.
Well, I guess we can at least say thank God he did.
Yeah, but that's for the next chapter. In the meantime, we have to deal with this, and oh boy. This is yet another chapter where it is in fact 2 missions in one. This time, it's based around the levels of certain units. If the combined level of your magic users, mages, shamans, clerics, basically anyone who can use a guiding ring, if that combined total is higher than your physical units, basically anyone who can use the hero crest like the Myrmidons or the warriors, etc., you get to go to Kenneth's chapter. If your physical units are stronger than the mages, then you get Jamei. Both of whom are very, very creepy bosses.
Yeah, basically I'm just gonna summarize ahead of time and say they are both stark raving off their rocker insane.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea of just how insane they are, Jamei is an assassin who, when first seeing Lyn, goes, "Oh, your skin is beautiful. If I cut you into ribbons, will it be like silk?" And Kenneth, when asked, Hannah, you're a bishop. Why are you in this League of Assassins exactly? His response is, quite literally, Nurgle is God!
Basically, folks, let me just sum up for you. On one hand, you have a boss who is Ted Bundy, and on the other hand, you have a boss who is Jim Jones.
Yeah, that sums it up. Okay. And in either case, both chapters, it's really irritating because both chapters are based around a network of fortresses in a snow-covered field. And the snow, it's a reskinned desert, it slows your movements down to a crawl, and then every once in a while you get snowstorms, which slow you down even further. And on top of that, because of the buildings creating a series of narrow corridors, you will often be bunched in with every single enemy in the map. So, yeah, this chapter will go on for a while.
Yeah, and it is very easy to get murdered if you're not careful, so be careful. And also hope you get Kenneth's chapter, because it's way easier to get inside in that one.
Indeed, yeah, once you're inside the forts, your movement will be returned to normal, but outside, have fun.
Pretty much. Also, it's just occurred to me looking at these 2 halves of the map. These are literally 2 halves of the same map.
My god, you're right.
These are actually the same map.
Yeah,
except
I do
one
see...
with a bigger fortress.
Yeah, I do see what you mean. In fact, there are sections that do seem to overlap, so I guess it is just one big map. I don't know, maybe the other boss is just having a party and they go, look, okay, I'm going to have this building just for my own weird party. You can have your fun over there.
Oh god. I'm only imagining the possibilities, and just the strangest thoughts of a party with Kenneth and Jermaine are coming to my head.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't dwell on that too much. Anyway.
Yeah, moving quickly on from probably satanic cults.
Yeah. You will also need a Fifalon because a lot of the doors are locked, so you need to get inside, and this leads into yet another condition of this chapter that changes on the fly. There are also 2 potential recruitable characters. In Kenneth's chapter, if you are able to defeat at least 3 promoted units, you will get a character known as Karel. If you fail that, you get Harken. In Jame's chapter, you have to open at least 4 doors in order to get Karel. If you don't do it by turn 7, you will get Harken. Both of these characters are actually pretty good pre-promotes for what they are. Obviously, if you train up Guy or Raven, they're outclassed, but if you find yourself low on units and need to grab a pre-promote, these 2 are definitely your best options.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt matters any that they are both severely interesting characters.
Indeed, in fact, both are interesting for different reasons. Harken is one of the knights that accompanied Lord Elbert. You know, the ones that got their asses handed to them and were slaughtered. Needless to say, he has survivor's guilt.
Yeah, as one would do.
He also has a relationship with Isadora, so if you have been using him, it might be a good idea to pair the 2 up again.
Yeah, even though that whole relationship is just kind of depressing. Then again, that's kind of Harken's entire character.
Yeah, Harken's just a depressing dude. By contrast, you have Karel, and... Okay, in Fire Emblem 6... At an extremely late point in the game, Karel was a recruitable character. He was a swordmaster and a uncle to one of the other recruitable characters, Ver, and bizarrely, Bartre's brother-in-law. We'll get into that.
All I can say to that is poor Karel.
Yeah.
Which is a weird phrase coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, the reason why that's strange is because in Fire Emblem 6, Karel is referred to as the Sword Saint, and he mentions that he wasn't always this way, that in the past he was a much darker person, and it took a strong force of will to overcome that. Fire Emblem 7 shows us just what that dark self looked like, and oh boy, it's creepy.
Yeah! We mentioned serial killers. That's basically Karel. He's basically a ratcheted up version of Lou Alarm from Sword of the Stranger. Which is actually kind of cool whenever I think of it, but that's beside the point.
Indeed. Karel is someone who's seeking to find strong opponents and slaughter them. That is the sole drive for his character at this point, and it may sound dull, but he actually goes about it in interesting ways. Like, the support conversation you can get between him and Guy is actually fascinating, because Guy asks him to train in the sword arts, and Karel goes, I've got nothing better to do, so might as well. But then when you get to the main supports, he starts to tell Guy, I cannot keep training you. You are continuously growing stronger, and it's taking all of my willpower to stop myself from killing you right here and now.
Yeah. So, again, completely psycho, but at least an interesting take on it. And it's bizarre because that whole exchange hints that Karel has some sort of buried morality, but how it got buried, I don't know.
Maybe it was just like an adrenaline rush or something, I don't know. Point is, he eventually gets better as a person, so I guess that the support conversation showed that his good side was always there. But yeah, it's still really interesting to see what he is like now. After you've fought through all those, you get to move on to the bosses. Neither of them are that challenging, to be honest. I mean, they're both powerful classes, but for some reason, they're kind of given bland weapons. I mean, Aura, it could be an intimidating spell, but light magic tends to be kind of weak at the best of times. It's one of the reasons why I don't use Lucius.
Yeah, and at this point, even with his 19 magic stat and aura, if you've been trading Canis, this is something I really like to do for just hilarious irony, just go up to Kenneth, take out Luna, and nuke him.
Yep, darkness swallowing light.
And in this case, it's hilarious because the light is utterly mad.
Oh, yes. And the dark is constantly protesting, no, honestly, I'm not evil, I just like darkness.
Constantly protesting that old TV trope, dark is not evil.
Yeah. As for Jimei, okay, it's weird. He's an assassin, and he talks about how he loves chopping people to bits, but they give him a light brand. Now, the light brand is a sword that also gives the enemy a ranged attack, which can be useful in some situations, but it kind of also has a low critical hit ratio, so it's basically an assassin who's not allowed to use the traits of an assassin. I mean, yeah, I get the fact that they didn't want him to be, like, insanely unbeatable, but at the same time, I don't know, it just feels a bit silly to have an assassin go, "Ah, welcome to my lair. I shall slice off your skin and use it to make a new rug. Zap. Zap, 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 zap. 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 Zap, zap, zap. I'm killing you. Zap."
Yeah, not only does it completely nerf him, it goes against everything they establish about him.
Yeah, so honestly, Jimei is not going to be a threat, so thankfully you can easily take care of these two bosses, and we can just move on with our lives, frankly.
Yeah, although that being said, don't get too cocky with Jermaine because one time I got too close to him. And he used lethality on Lynn with a light brand.
Wow. That is... Okay, yeah, but you might want to be careful about that then.
Yeah, because lethality can still happen. It's not going to happen a lot, because Jermaine has been reduced to a pathetic joke by that weapon. But
yeah.
He's a pathetic joke that can occasionally surprise you. Oh god, that was embarrassing.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about lethality. Actually, we'll get more into that right now. Because the assassin class is one that was introduced in this game, and we're going to see a lot more of it, because at the end of this chapter, our heroes recover the Fire Emblem, and they race back in order to protect the prince, which leads into the next chapter. Chapter 28, Battle Before Dawn. To sum up quickly the premise of this chapter, Nino and Jafar sneak in with the intention of killing Zephadel, but Nino overhears the prince praying to whatever god exists in this version of Fire Emblem, basically to pray that their family can just get back together and stop trying to kill each other. At that point, God has a funny way of answering his prayers as Jafar knocks him out as soon as he's finished and then asks Nino to kill him. However, Nino has a change of heart, saying that, well, she can't force herself to do it because Zephadel is in fact just like her. And when Jafar tells her, "Look, I won't let you ruin this chance," Nino goes, "Okay, yeah, fine, kill me, I knew this was coming." At which point, Jafar considers it, then decides that the two of them are going to run away. This plan would succeed if it wasn't for the fact that Sonia had considered Jafar's behaviour suspicious, sent Ursula to spy on him, and yeah, point is, this all leads into a great big fight, especially when our heroes arrive on the scene, and yep, this chapter is basically a survive for 12 turns chapter, with the objective being defend the prince at all costs.
Yep, and let me tell you, this was just about whenever this game first started being a lesson in life philosophy for me, because at age 12, 13, I didn't really believe in forgiveness and redemption. Then this chapter happens with Jafar, and man, I was conflicted.
Yeah, this is a moment when Jafar starts to take a turn, and he actually becomes a pretty cool guy. And this is also where we get to see the assassin class in full effect. We mentioned that Jimei could be a potentially dangerous unit in the right circumstances. Jafar is insane.
Yeah, he is the good circumstances.
Like with Penn's introduction, what's going to happen is that Jafar will be in the corner fighting every single enemy that comes towards him. And whilst admittedly, if the enemy does land a hit on him, he has low stamina, so he is in risk of death, but at the same time, he can still hold his own pretty well, as he can duck out of most hits, and like we mentioned, he has the skill Lethality. Admittedly, this skill wouldn't receive its name until Fire Emblem 8, but it works in exactly the same way, although part of me prefers the fan nickname One Hit Death Blow. I don't know why.
Shonen anime style.
Basically, what happens in this skill is your character will perform the critical hit animation, except as it does so, he starts shaking, creating an after image. This then instantly kills the opponent. It doesn't matter what weapon you're using, it doesn't matter if you had no chance of killing it previously. If lethality kicks in, it's instant death.
Yeah, which is really, really funny when you use it against a general. Just saying.
Yeah, indeed. So
Mostly because I have to seriously wonder where the hell an assassin would find to stick a 6-inch dagger in a mecha suit.
You'd be surprised, there is an entire sword fighting style based around aiming for joints, so...
Fair enough.
Yeah, point is, Jafar can handle most of the map, and yeah, this is another Fog of War chapter, so it's mostly in darkness, so bring thieves and torches and split your armies into 2 groups in order to take either side path. There is some really good items in these treasure chests.
First of all, in the left chest of the western room, you get the boots, which give you an extra +2 movement. Basically, this item is either something you can use to make your generals just a bit more useful, or something you can use to make your Pegasus Knights just a bit more broken. Speaking of broken Pegasus Knights, in the eastern room, you'll find the rescue staff, which any healer can use to pull a unit away from danger, and the Delphi shield. Want to elaborate, Jonin?
Oh, yes. Basically, the one sad weakness of Pegasus Knights is that the archers get a special bonus whenever they shoot at them. The Delphi shield negates that. Flyers are no longer harmed by arrows.
Yeah, it takes away their one weakness. So basically, enjoy that, Florina, or Farina, or Fiora. It's pretty much broken on anyone.
Yeah.
And again, speaking of broken Pegasus Knights, also in this chapter is the final Elysian Whip on the Bishop guarding the east entrance.
Yep.
So you could feasibly have every single Falcon Knight in the game on your team.
And of course, that's what always happens when I'm going through Hector's run, not gonna lie.
Well, what can we say? The Pegasus Knights are awesome, each in their separate ways. They're all really nicely characterized. There's no real reason to avoid them.
Yeah, and there is yet another reason why I'm a big Pegasus Knight fanboy, and it all leads to my main strategy for the boss, Ursula. Now, admittedly, there is also a paladin called Maxine, but I honestly don't know why they bothered, since he's a recolor of Cameron, except less useful.
Yeah, and it's difficult to get less useful than David Cameron.
Oh, yes, indeed. Anyway,
that old joke out of the way.
in Elliott's story, the two of them are on the bottom left-hand corner, so whilst Ursula can use bolting if you get into range, it's actually pretty hard to get to her since you have to go through the main bulk of the enemy force. In Hector's chapter, she's moved to the bottom right corner, only a short distance away from your main force. Now, the idea of this is supposedly that she can use bolting to mess with you, but it's very easy to avoid as long as you stay out of her range. The Pegasus Knights, on the other hand, all 3 of them can fly down towards her rather easily, not encountering a single enemy in the process, dodge or simply tank through the bolting, and they can activate their special skill. If you get all 3 Pegasus Knights round a single enemy, and then have one of them attack, you will activate what is known in Fire Emblem as the triangle attack. Basically, instant critical hit.
Yep. ×3, I think.
Oh god, you're right, yeah.
So, yeah. Basically, if you activate this, say goodbye to whatever you activated it on. Literally anything.
Yeah, it's the perfect setup for the triangle attack. I do it every single time, and put bluntly, Ursula does not last a single round.
Yeah, basically just get all the treasure you need and then nuke her. It's funny because that was the same strategy I suggested with the last boss.
Indeed. This is the reason why I'm a Pegasus Knight fanboy, folks. They have excellent range, speed, attack, you can set them up perfectly, and for some weird reason, there's a tradition that they're the ones who perform the triangle attack. The only exceptions I can think of were Fire Emblem 6, which had a general triangle attack, I think.
Which was kind of pointless because the only useful general in that game was Wendy.
And in Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, there was a bow triangle attack with Oscar, Boyd, and Rolf, but Not a big fan of archers, so I hardly ever used it.
Yeah, sadly. And it's funny you mentioned Rolf. I say that because it's basically funny that you mentioned a really young character who as a unit has really bad level and stat problems, yet is amazing if you manage to raise them. I say it's funny because that's Nino in a nutshell.
Yep, and she's recruitable in this chapter. By the Eastern Room, where the Delphi Shield is, she is fighting off some weak mages and actually doing a pretty good job. So if you send one of her lords over to her, you can recruit her. And yeah, like Sven said, she is a unit that will gain amazing stats if you're able to level her up. In fact, there are many Fire Emblem players who swear by her. Problem is, she's a level 10 mage. At the point when everyone you're using is a promoted unit at this stage. I mean, hell, even at this stage, Molinus is a promoted unit.
Which is just sad.
Yeah, so I have tried to use her. I have honestly tried, but the best I can get her at is a level 1 sage by the penultimate chapter, and at that point, I've got Urk at level 15 with higher stats who's been around since day 1. I just can never get her to be an effective fighter. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, I mean, again, you can always use the mind glitch in the next chapter, which I have done before, and yes, I will vouch for Nino becoming absolutely godlike, but it's just a hassle. I mean, really, all they could have done to make Nino perfectly usable is give her 5 more levels. That's it.
Yeah, it would require a lot less work, honestly.
Yeah, because as it is, level 10 mage. Whenever you were fighting level 13 units unpromoted and level 6 units promoted, she goes squish.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because this is obviously not a reflection on her character. She is a very likable character. It's just she's damn near impossible to use.
Yeah. After recruiting Nino, if you want to get the next side quest, you will need to have her talk to Jafar, and thankfully, the rescue staff Sven mentioned actually comes in handy for this. If you give it to Basilia, it works on NPCs as well, so she can pull Jafar out of the main bulk of the enemies, meaning that you can get him to safety and just have Nino talk to him, thereby activating the next chapter, but we'll get to that in a moment. At the end of it all, the prince is safe and the group managed to hightail it out of there, and initially Hector wants to kill Jafar, but Nino vouches for him, and Hector eventually decides you're nothing more than a tool, and it's pointless breaking tools.
You know, there are days I am truly amazed that Hector is a protagonist. I've been amazed of that since the day he murdered a soldier for being in his way. But
speaking of very flawed people, we go to tell the Queen this excellent news and pass on the Fire Emblem. But she's still raving about how, yes, this will be an excellent moment when I'll finally get one up on the damn king. And she's about to tell everyone the location of the Shrine of Seals when Anyword unfortunately makes the mistake of asking, are you really so vindictive that you'd put your son's life in danger just to get one over that guy?
Elliewood, if there's one thing that Game of Thrones has taught us, good people should not open their mouths in stories like this.
Yeah, although thankfully, this is not Game of Thrones. She shoos them off. At first it looks like her heroes are going to have to find another way, but the Queen then shows up because she then just gets the news that Zephidel was almost killed, and she kind of figures our heroes had something to do with it, so she says, thank you. I'm sorry for everything that happened, so here's the Heaven Seal, here's the map to the Shrine of Seals, and I'll make sure that most of the guards are conveniently out of the area when you arrive.
Yeah, so at least one member of Alib's answer to the Lannisters is decent. Ish.
Yeah. For the West, when you're playing this game on standalone, this then leads into a cheesy but still adorable scene where the Queen sits down with Zephidel and says, I'm sorry for everything I've said and done up until this point. Let's try and bring the family back together, and let's see if we can all live in a palace again and be a family. Problem. Fire Emblem 6. Zephidel's the villain.
Yeah, and the reason behind that is that his father was so horrible he literally drove him insane.
Yeah, in fact, funny thing, this is revealed as part of the story of Fire Emblem 6. Desmond then tries to have Zephyrdel killed again, and at first it looks like it succeeds, but then when Desmond goes over to the coffin to check on Zephyrdel, Zephyrdel literally bursts out of the casket and runs Desmond through.
Yeah, which, A, in this entire game I don't think there's anyone who had that coming more, and B, God, that's an awesome image.
Oh, yes. If nothing else, while Zephyrdel's fate is kind of tragic, we can take solace in the fact that Desmond definitely got what he deserved.
Oh God, yes. It says something that in a game with morphs like Ephodel and Sonya, Desmond is in a very good position to be the worst person in the game.
Oh, yes, but he has stiff competition, as if you did manage to get Neo to talk to Jafar and Recruiter, you get the side chapter, 28X, Night of Farewells. Okay, basic premise of this chapter, Nino wants to go and talk to Sonya to try and settle things before they leave. Jafar thinks that this is an absolutely stupid idea, but he's willing to go along with it to protect her. The Lords, they're equally nervous about this, and Hector, he's initially reluctant because, like Sven said, Jafar did pretty much murder Leela, and I do get that some people have problems with this because it seems Hector is overly violent. Like Sven said, he did kill a soldier just because he was in his way, but I do kind of like that just because he seems to be a protagonist with a flaw. Like, there are people who claim that Lynn is a Mary Sue. I don't really agree with it, but I can kind of see why some people may draw to that conclusion, since the only flaw I can see Lynn having is being prideful and bickering, and Eliwood's, well, he hardly has any characterization anyway, aside from peaceful pacifist.
Yeah, Eliwood's personality, I'm going to list to you how many times it's been done. Marth, Celeste from Fire Emblem 4, in fact I think Sigurd from the same game was the same way, Roy, Eliwood's son. He is basically the exact same Rapier Lord template as everyone else.
Yeah, I think even Erica counted as that now that I think about it.
Yep. Oh, thank God for Fire Emblems 9 through 13 for subverting that.
Yeah, so compared to all of that, Hector is actually a breath of fresh air just because of how flawed he is. Like, yeah, he's not perfect, but he still tries to be a good person despite that, and he actually gets a lot of the best development in this game, at least as part of the main plot, and we're gonna talk about that in the next episode when it finally does come to a head. But what is, Hector's reluctant, but he eventually agrees once he's had the chance to vent. And now we enter the Water Temple, which is the Black Fang's last stronghold, and oh boy, this chapter. Sven mentioned that Desmond was one of the biggest contenders for worst person in the game. Sonya decides that he's going to give him a run for his money and, depending on your opinion, surpass him in this very chapter.
Oh dear God, yeah. Yes, that's putting it mildly.
Okay, first of all, she chastises Limstella despite being a fellow Ernogo comrade because she believes that she is human and Limstella is just another worthless puppet, which it's devastating to her when she realizes that she is a morph. Unfortunately, for everyone else saw it coming a mile away because we were told explicitly morphs have golden eyes and black hair.
Yeah, it was kind of obvious.
I mean, even just comparing the two side by side, they look exactly the same. Even if you miss that plot point, you would have thought, hang on a moment.
Yeah, morphs are kind of obvious, let's just say. And while I'm at it, I will say this again. Morphs are both kind of obvious, and considering that they were built to be emotionless killing machines, really bizarrely inclined to be complete and utter monsters.
Yeah, speaking of which, her first act is Brendan, first leader of the Black Fang, comes in to confront her about something, at which point Sonya goes, you know what, feck it, I'm tired of this deception. I only married you to get control of the Black Fang, and now I've replaced pretty much every single member of the Black Fang with morphs. You can die now! And the two of them have a little clash and she kills him, and it's all fairly standard, but there's one little detail I want to mention, because It seems pointless at first, but it does actually have an important role. As the two of them clash, Brendan actually nicks Sonya, and Limstella wonders if Sonya should step out of the battle and let her take over, but Sonya says, no, I can handle it. If you skip this side quest, which I actually did the first time I played through this game, because I heard rumours that it was such a hard chapter, I chickened out because I was kind of a wuss like that. You'll instead get a scene where Sonya reports what's happened to Nurgle, that the plan failed and she killed Brendan Reed. Nurgle notices the injury and then decides, you know what, I've no use for a defective puppet, so I'm just going to kill you where you stand, and does so.
Never in the game will you ever root for Nurgle so hard.
Indeed. At this point, Nina arrives, and it's time for us to stop beating around the bush. Nino desperately tries to make a compassionate plea to Sonya, and then Sonya goes, you know what, Nino? You were never my daughter. You know what happened to your real parents? I killed them. I grabbed a random child, used it as a hostage, and then murdered them. The only reason you're alive is because Nurgle thought you might be useful. I've been wanting to kill you for years. Right to her face, folks.
Yeah. Again, folks. Morphs. I'm not detecting much emotionless from these guys, as I am complete and utter unremitting cruelty.
Yeah. So, basically, premise for this chapter. If you didn't have a reason to kill Sonya before, by God, you have a reason now.
Yeah, to say the least. And I will say at this point, thank God that it's the non-canonical route to skip this chapter, because this is basically the Ephodel fight we never got. Just for the record, speaking of the morphs, this is also the chapter that permanently solidified Limstella as my favorite, because whenever Sonya's dying, she basically comes in and mocks her viciously. In any other situation, with any other character, it would have been outlandishly cruel, but in this situation, I'm with Limstella. Sonya deserved no less.
Yep. Sonya is the boss for this chapter, and the group arrives on the scene to save Nina before she is killed, and the battle begins, and oh dear God. Funny thing, everyone kept saying that the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time is the worst dungeon in the game, and how awful it was. And as it turned out, in the 3D version, all you needed to do was make the iron boots an item rather than a piece of equipment, and there you go, problem solved. But, this Water Temple is a nightmare of a chapter, and I don't know if I'd call it the hardest chapter in the game, but it is definitely the most frustrating.
I will completely agree. And I'm gonna sum up why in 2 words. Disappearing bridges.
Yep. Basically, as the Water Temple implies, the map is basically just a group of tiles on top of water. Your only way to move between these two land spaces are bridges that are literally 1 square wide and disappear at complete random. Meaning that unless you have flyers or darts, your movement is incredibly limited.
Yep. It is exactly as much of a pain in the ass as it sounds.
And of course there are Wyvern Riders, and of course there are Ballistas and Pirates, and of course Sonya has Bolting, the long range spell. So, yeah, no matter what tactic you're using, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
And just for the record, this chapter is made even worse by the fact that for whatever reason, Merlinus buggers off. Which means that all the chests on the map, you have to micromanage your inventories, or you're forced to drop something.
Oh god, yes. We're back to the days of the Lynn prologue, ladies and gentlemen. And it's really irritating because those chests contain some really good items. You have the Speed Wings, you have the most powerful dark spell Fenrir, you have the Recover Staff, and you have Thor's Ire, a magic ring for Nidian that boosts critical hit rate.
Pro tip, Jafar. That's all that needs to be said. Now aside from those items, you also have steel items on an enemy bishop and an enemy wyvern lord, an angelic robe, and a blue gem. So yeah, there's a lot of good loot in this chapter.
Yes, and of course it would be the chapter you have to drop items to get half of that stuff with. Oh.
Yeah, infinite annoyance.
And it's also annoying that Sonya, whilst you fought a lot of sages at this point, can still be a bit of trouble. I mean, thankfully, she's standing right next to two columns, which give you an extra 5 points of evasion, which is incredibly useful if you get a high evasion unit like Jafar. But as long as you're careful, you should be able to take her out. And she also has another really good loot item, the Fell Contract. This is an especially important item, because there is a reason why assassins were introduced. After God knows how many years of Fire Emblem, the thieves can finally be promoted.
Yep. And assassin is their promoted class. And Sonya has literally the only promotion item in the game for them.
Yeah, the only other way to get Fell Contracts is with the secret shops, and not only are they incredibly hard to pull off, they are also ludicrously expensive.
So unless you have been arena spamming to buggery and back, you're SOL.
Yeah, like we said, the thieves are pretty much similar stat-wise, so whichever thief you've been raising, you can turn that one into an assassin. Or you could stick with Jafar. That's a good option as well, since Jafar, I think it's fair to say he's the best pre-promoted unit in the game, since he still has a fairly decent range of stats, and whilst Matthew or Legault will probably outdo him in terms of speed and luck, Jafar will still have the better strength of the two, and in fact, whilst Matthew does turn into an amazingly good assassin, it takes a while for him to start doing any major damage because, well, he did initially have the strength of a thief.
Yeah, strength of a thief basically is threatening in a melee fight as a wet kitten.
Indeed. But yeah, this chapter and the next essentially mark the end of the Black Fang as Sonya dies and Nino and Brendan's brother, Uncle Jan, kind of have a tearful discussion about how the Black Fang was like a family and now it's all been completely destroyed. And actually, funny thing about this conversation, it kind of leads me to this alternate interpretation of a scene I've had in recent memories, but I don't know if anyone has the same version of it as me. Back when the Four Fangs were first introduced, there was a moment where the brothers Reed asked Sonya if the orders came from Brendan. She says, "Oh, of course, isn't that right, my love?" And he goes, yes, they're my orders, excuse me. Most people would take that to be a sign that, oh, Sonya has him possessed. Uncle Jan reveals that Brendan never actually trusted Sonya, and he did some investigation, and so he already knew who Nina was. That's the reason why, at the start of this chapter, Brendan came in to confront her. I like to think that in that scene, Brendan was actually just lost in thought. Like, he was letting Sonya just carry on with her own devices, but he was still thinking about whether or not the rumours he's hearing about his new wife are true or not, and thus he's distant. That's my interpretation of it anyway. I don't know if it's what they were going for canonically, but eh.
Yeah, and now that you mention it, I sign on with that, not least because the whole possession thing is way overdone anyway.
Yeah, but yeah, it's this point where the Black Fan as it once was is about to come to an end. Brendan Reed's gone, most of the original fans are gone, there is just one guy left. And this leads us into Chapter 29, Cog of Destiny. Okay, we make it to the Shrine of the Seals, and there is no single guard in sight, save for the second Reed brother, and the rest of the Black Fang, who have decided that there is only one course of action. Go on a revenge-fueled rampage and kill the entire group.
Yep. And looking at this unit list, oh boy, they bring their best and their brightest, alright. A lot of their best and their brightest.
Yep, and Nino is desperately saying, well, can't we talk to the brothers and sort this out? But Jafar points out to Nino that it's not going to work. Not only are they desperate for revenge, he points out that they served Nurgle, so technically, as far as these guys were concerned, they were never Fangs. They were intruders who kind of ruined everything. Which, yeah, you kind of see, given what Nurgle and Sonya did to the Black Fang, why they would be less than pleased to give the benefit of the doubt to Sonya's daughter and Nurgle's personal killing machine.
Yeah.
So, in short, this chapter is basically a slog to reach the Shrine of Seals and deal with the last Reed brother. And there are a lot of enemies, and like Sven said, they are the best and brightest. Thankfully, your units have now reached a stage when they're also the best and brightest. This chapter has an epic sense of finality, but I think it's also the moment when I kind of started to realise how powerful some of the units had gotten at this stage. How I usually do this is get 3 groups of units and split them down the 3 paths, leaving 2 guys on the bridge here to deal with the main bulk of the force. Dart can go along the centre route where he will meet most of the axe units and generals, and he can slaughter them all single-handedly. I'm not joking here. If you train him high enough, he will be at a point where he is literally 0-0-0-0. And essentially, the enemy has no hope of stopping him. Also, it is a challenging map because the reinforcements will keep coming, but yeah, if you move smartly and bring only the best of the best, you will steadily make progress, and boy, it will feel satisfying when you do.
Yeah, basically, this chapter in general is just a really satisfying final battle sort of chapter in the first place, so...
Yeah, I know what you mean. As for what this essentially is, like the end of the original Black Fang, it definitely adds that great sense of closure. And you will want to keep your main lord and a couple of other units down below. Why? Well, one of the reinforcement patterns is to have a row of 3 Wyvern Riders pop down. This is actually extremely useful because it's a good grinding spot for Nino if you need to build up experience. And also, this is where Vida shows up. Except this time, if you use the main lord, you can recruit her.
Yeah, and just for the record, I heavily recommend that because even though she is sadly without her absolutely broken spear at this point, she's still a relatively decent pre-promote, and I would argue actually better than Heath. I've had better luck with Vida than I've had with Heath. And speaking of Heath, she's also a way more interesting character to me.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Speaking of which, one thing we forgot to mention during Unfulfilled Heart, she is actually Heath's former commander. The two of them were both caught up in the same incident that left them both stripped of their rank. So, the two of them do actually have a history together with their supports, and, fun fact, in the original draft of this game, they were originally siblings.
Which... no.
Yeah, in hindsight, I think it was probably a good change they made.
Yeah, I just cannot picture it in the way that they had it.
Yeah, especially since it was kind of an abusive sibling relationship from what I could gather from the support conversations.
Yeah, which is disturbing for a whole mess of reasons on its own. And just for the record, I find it worthwhile to recruit her just for her support conversations, because her support conversation with Wallace is the funniest thing ever.
You're gonna have to remind me of that one. It's been years since I've read that one.
Basically, her support conversation with Wallace is just a long line of the two of them hammily ranting about destroying each other and sparring.
Wow.
It's like a conversation I would expect Major Armstrong to be in Full Metal Alchemist. And of course you get all of Wallace in his madly laughing glory. Fun fact, just because of his name and his personality, I've always pictured him as being Scottish.
Yeah, I guess I can see how you thought it comes to that.
But, yeah, just putting this out there right now, Vida and Wallace's support conversation. Totally worth recruiting Vida.
Indeed. And we also have the final Linus brother, and no matter what you've got, it's gonna be a tough one. If you have Linus, he is a powerhouse that can do heavy damage. If you're against Lloyd, he's a sword master, and he can still land pretty vicious criminals. The criminals? Damn it!
What? Pretty vicious criminals. Awesome.
And he can still land some pretty vicious criticals. They have a light brand, and fairly high magic stats, I'm tempted to say, so I don't think you'll be able to try that against them. And on top of that, they have the Iron Rune. Sven, would you like to explain to the audience what the Iron Rune does?
Long story short, it completely negates any possibility of getting a critical hit against either of them. So, basically, forget all thought of sending one of your sword masters in to take care of their 50 plus HP.
Yeah, the best way I can think of would be either sending in a unit with high defense like a general, or giving Dart the Sword Weaver, the axe that's effective against swords, and a healer with Psychic that's just out of range so that they can heal up.
Yep, pretty much. It's gonna be a slog, unless you get spectacular damage from Dart, but it's doable, especially with the Psychic staff, like Jonin just said.
Also, one thing about the two brothers is it's kind of funny how they deal with grief in different ways. Like I said, Lino wants to try and talk things out with them, and if you're a very brave person, you can have Nino walk up to them and talk. Unfortunately, neither of them will listen for different reasons. If she talks to Lloyd, she at least gets a conversation out of him, but Lloyd just calmly and coldly says, "Look, it doesn't matter if they're innocent or not. I have come to take their lives. It is now time for us to say goodbye, Nino. I am sorry." Linus just goes, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you all! I'm not ready to listen to any of you!"
Yeah, basically, think of Diomedes from Ogre Battle 64 gone utterly mad.
Yep, pretty much. But yeah, if you defeat them, you'll be able to get the Iron Rune itself, which is a pretty useful item to have, especially for recruiting one character that we'll talk about in the next episode. And so, once he's finally dead, Athos shows up. Apparently, he's been watching the entire thing with his crystal, and the reason he didn't just teleport everyone here in the first place is that apparently he needed to test their abilities, and that they could only have obtained the strength and knowledge they have now by going through all of the other chapters, which, yeah, in a way, I guess it was ultimately beneficial, especially for the fact that they were able to save Zephyrdel, but on the other hand, it is kind of a dick move.
Yeah, which seems to be a running theme. On the one hand, yeah, it does make sense, but on the other hand, good God, Athos, you subversive dick, you're worse than Dumbledore!
Yeah, point is, he shows up and then takes them deep into the Shrine of Seals, where they meet the only other surviving member of the 8 legendary heroes, Bramimont. Yeah, remember back in the ultra super secret special chapter, the side quest within a side quest? Theodore mentioned that if you use dark magic for too long, you lose your soul and your sense of self. This is exactly what's happened to Bramimont here, and actually, this is just a side note. One thing I've always thought about Bramimont, this is just a personal interpretation, and this will probably never happen, because A, I don't have the time, and B, someone's already doing a very, very good job of it right now. Roy Havenstone!
Shameless plug.
But my interpretation of Bramimont, it's basically explained that because Bramimont has no sense of self, there are as many different versions of Bramimont as they are talking to him. He is basically a mirror that reflects the personality back at them. And there is a very subtle touch in the dialogue that reflects this, if you'll excuse the unintentional pun. Eliwood greets him by being formal, so Bramimont's response is equally formal in return. Lynn then tries to make a compassionate plea saying that there is so much at stake right now, and Bramimont responds compassionately saying, "I am truly sorry, but I cannot release those seals no matter what." Hector then goes, "What the bloody hell are you talking about? The entire world could burn at this point." And Bramimont responds very angrily. So, the way I would imagine it is that every time he makes those responses, his voice is a distorted version of whoever was talking to him previously. So when Lynn talks to him, he speaks with Lynn's voice that's even deepened or with a filter. When Hector talks to him, and so on and so on and so on. And part of the reason why I say that is because even Hector admits that his voice keeps changing as well as his personality.
Yeah, which, knowing that, I can totally see your mental image of it. And it's really cool!
Yeah, even if I never get to do a Fire Emblem fandom, part of me is tempted to do that scene just to see how it would all end up sounding. But yeah, long story short, Athos basically explains to Barrymore that they do need to release the seals on the legendary items, which Barrymore is still pretty nervous about. And the reason for this is, it's kind of a reveal later on in Fire Emblem 6, but without spoiling too much, it's implied that the part of the reason the dragons can't come back is because the atmosphere of Elebe has changed. That was due to the legendary items. They were once so powerful that even using them in battle pretty much screwed up the ecosystem.
Wow. All this time we were working toward getting the legendary weapons, and it turns out we were working towards acquiring one great big allegory for global warming.
Or an allegory for nuclear weapons, at any rate. But either way, they decided to make an exception just this once, since the weapons have slightly lost power anyway. And it all seems hunky-dory. All we need to do now is pick up the legendary weapons and we can challenge Nurgle. The problem is, Nurgle decides that he's had enough sitting around waiting for the group and just shows up literally outside Bramwell's doorstep.
Yeah, for once, a villain actually takes a proactive step.
Yeah, and he basically says, I have come for the children now, and I'll kill you if you get in my way. Nidian then decides to do the self-sacrificing approach by saying to Nurgle, alright, I'll come with you, just don't do anything to hurt Eliwood and Niles, and she does so. Unfortunately, neither Eliwood or Niles kindly seem to understand the terms of the sacrifice and try to charge straight at Nurgle, which leads to him create, I can only describe as a strange combination teleport and explode spell. It's really weird, the entire screen just whites out when you never really see what happened, but point is, this ends up knocking both Niles and Eliwood out, and apparently if Athos hadn't erected a barrier at the last minute, it might have killed them.
Man, that would have been a short game. Well, actually it wouldn't have. That would have been a depressing game.
Yeah, point is, now that Nurgle has knitted it again, the group needs to get their arse in gear, but thankfully, Athos has the last Heaven Seal, and this is the one that works on your main character. So, in Hector's story, this would be when Hector finally promotes to Great Lord, and in Eliwood's story, this would be when he finally promotes to... Wait, is he Great Lord as well? I forget.
Night Lord.
Night Lord, thank you. Point is, all of the lords are now promoted, and we have to begin a hunt for the legendary weapons to bring the fight to Nurgle. But that is for another day, as we have already talked about a lot in this episode. So, until next time, I've been the Jelly Monkey.
And I've been Sven the Crusader. I'm just glad to have done this. Actually done this now.
Indeed. We've had a lot of problems in this recording, but I think you'll agree the results were satisfying.
Yes, the results were as satisfying as what happened to Sonya.